Hey there, YouTube. I'm Ikitsu. This is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to a little bit of Sins of a Solar Empire 2. So today we're going to be talking about the Kortul Devastator, which is the battleship for the Asari faction. Um, Unlike what you would expect, this isn't like a massive brick that just has the biggest guns and the highest damage. Technically speaking, it has the second highest damage in a capital ship to capital ship duel by a little bit. It's very, very close, actually, and it gets outscaled in the late game by the other competitors. But anyway, let's take a look at the numbers here. So this thing has a durability of 500. It's got 3,120 shield points, 1,620 armor points, 3,640 hull points, and an antimatter reserve of 225. It does have a fighter bay, and it does get up to maximum of 2, I believe, at higher levels. And then for armaments, we're looking at one heavy wave cannon with 30 damage per second with 300 pierce. It's got 6 beams at 6.7 DPS at 500 pierce. The total for that is like over 40 something, but it's not really relevant. The actual value that you're getting out of these is 26.8, which is the same as the Jerasul Evacuator. And we'll get into why that is in a little bit, but for now, we'll just say that's got 26.8 damage per second for that. And then it has one heavy phase missile at 15 damage per second with 600 pierce. So, all in all, the armaments for this are pretty good. It's not like radically lower than the Radiance, and it's not like radically higher than the Coal, but it is, in that same sort of ballpark, which is a surprise. You think of Asari ships, you usually think that they're going to be a little bit higher quality. Generally, that tends to be the case. Not so with the Kortul Devastator. In fact, this is actually more of a support ship than it is a proper battleship in some ways, although it is still capable of punching pretty hard. So let's take a look at the gun placements and figure out why I'm talking about it the way I'm talking about it. So we can see over here, these are the beam guns. We got one over here, one over here. This is the wave gun in the center here, this big center line thing. Two more beam guns. We got the missiles sort of like scattered out around the place. You got here, I think. No, not there. Here, 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 and that all counts as one missile because missiles are mysterious and inexplicable in terms of how they actually count the mounts for missiles. But that counts as one missile at 15 damage per second. So where are the other two beams? Oh, they're back here. Yeah, so 13.4 of our damage per second is facing the wrong direction. Now, if I was designing this and I actually gave a crap about gun convergence, I'd put like one set of beam. I would remove like maybe this one and this one, or I would remove this one and this one, or sorry, this one and keep this one. But I put like beams up here, beams down here rather. So that way they could all converge forward fairly effectively, and we'd be able to target everything that's directly in front of us very, very neatly. I'd also shave off this bit here. But gun convergence is not something that video game designers like, because when you have effectively designed gun convergence, then ships become effective, and you wouldn't want that. I think Elite Dangerous is the worst for that. In any event, though, so yeah, we're missing a bunch of damage from our, unfortunately, capital ship weapons. Unlike the the Coal or the Radiance, which designed their ship with all of their big, heavy, hard-hitting weapons capable of firing directly in front of the ship against capital ships that can't maneuver around it, and then all of their light guns around the sides so that they can fire at lighter targets on the periphery, the Asari have decided to put their anti-light weapon in a big spinal mount down the center so that they can absolutely obliterate that one corvette that decided to get into the sight line impudently and decided to just evaporate in one shot. And then they've made it so that their anti-capital weapon ships, which are designed to track and fire at very large, slow targets, or even immobile targets, are scattered nice and evenly around the hull so that they've got good, even coverage against that. Very, very intelligent weapon design on the part of the Vasari. I love it. Anyway, let's sort of take a look at their abilities here. So, Power Surge is where this ship catches up in terms of just brawling, but I also think it's one of the weaker abilities of the ship in a certain sense there. It has a cooldown of 30 seconds and it has an antimatter cost of 60, and it's actually a really, really powerful self buff for the ship. It only impacts the weapons that use energy, which in this case is the energy beams and the wave gun. So increases your weapon reload speed by 24%, 48%, and 72% at maximum level. So you almost double the amount of times you fire it at maximum level. It also restores your shields at 12, 24, and 36 per second. And the duration increases as it goes, but the cooldown also increases. The amount of uptime that you have for this actually stays at approximately the same. capping out at 90 seconds and 72 seconds at level 3. The antimatter cost also ramps up from 60 to 90 to 120 at maximum. And the way that this works is that the cooldown to duration ratio stays the same no matter what, but the antimatter cost to uptime ratio drops. So you'll have more uptime per cast, and you'll be spending less antimatter for each second of active power surge. So this does become more efficient in every sort of way as you level it. So do definitely level it if you want to deal more damage. Now this is how you get the Kortul Devastator to actually like punch effectively across its weight class, because otherwise it has trouble keeping up with the other two once you start getting items and abilities locked in there. But Power Surge, a very, very powerful ability. The effect of the shield restored on this makes it so that you're brawling very effectively with this ship, and it is very, very good in a slugfight against enemy ships. This is sort of the weakest ability come the later game, though, where the guns on the ship don't really keep up. You don't have the best itemization to keep it up, and you're competing against jam weapons, which is a much, much more powerful ability. And I think secretly Disrupt Armor is something that you would want in low volumes against key targets during the late game. So I think that Power Surge is just going to increase your damage by just a little bit compared to what you can get on the Radiance or the Coal. Whereas like Disrupt Armor increases the damage you deal by an infinitesimally small amount, but across every single ship in your fleet, because you want to focus fire in this game. Jam weapons, on the other hand, makes it so that every enemy ship just gets to eat shit. It's a really, really powerful debuff. So Power Surge, very, very good early mid-game, where it's capable of making the ship punch really, really good. It makes it so that if it's getting focused down, it's capable of surviving for much, much longer because of those shields. It's a very good buff. But it's not my favorite ability for this thing. The next one is Jam Weapons, which is my favorite ability for this thing. It has cooldown of 30 seconds, and it does scale upwards, similar to how the cooldown for Power Surge scales upwards. 30, 60, 90, I think, as well. The antimatter cost stays the same. It stays at 90 no matter what, which means that this starts off brutally expensive to cast at level 1. And it remains brutally expensive to cast, but at least since your cooldown increases, you're not casting it as often, which makes it so that it's easier to cast more often, or when it comes off cooldown. This increases the weapon reload duration for enemy ships by 12%, 24%, and 36% at maximum level, which is a huge weapon debuff. This is a very, very difficult thing to get hit by. Weapon tracking speed also decreases, but I don't know of as many situations where that really matters. There are certain fringe situations where weapon tracking speed does actually make a difference. It's pretty rare. Radius is 6,600 around the ship, so you do have to sort of fly into the enemy fleet with this thing, which can be dangerous. And it has a duration of 18 seconds, and it does scale upwards. So you do need 2 Kortul Devastators to have this up 100% of the time, and you absolutely want this up 100% of the time, even if one of them gets sniped. So I almost think that like 3 Kortals during the mid-late game is practically mandatory for the Visari, and maybe even a little bit more than that if you expect a lot of them to get killed. This is a super, super powerful debuff, and it's something that you really need to have if you want to compete with certain fleet compositions. It's just really, really strong. Arguably, this is what you should have instead of Serevun Overseers, and this is sort of your equivalent to the Hoshiko or the Iconis Guardian, which is really weird because this is your capital ship. It's just a really, really great ability. The main problem is that you're going to run out of antimatter early game using this, and if you're up against Advent, you're probably going to get shut out of using this in the late game. Because what's going to happen is a bunch of Dominus Subjugators will waddle up to you, and you're just going to lose the ability to cast Jam Weapons ever again. But, that's fine. Next up is Disrupt Armor. This one has a 6%, 12%, 18% scaling chance by level to apply a stack to the enemy. Each of those stacks reduces their armor strength by 6, 12, and 18%, up to a maximum of like 3 stacks. So at maximum, you're looking at 54% or 54 reduction of enemy armor strength. Now, the duration doesn't really matter. It resets every time a new stack applies, as far as I can tell. So getting to 3 stacks does not take that much time once you get to cap level. But Disrupt Armor is a deceptive ability. You technically want to cast this on things that have as close to 50 armor as possible because of the weird way that armor works in this game. So armor is not like a flat reductive ability there. It's got the sort of like curve to it, where the first point of armor is the most valuable point of armor that you have, and every single point of armor past that has diminishing returns from that. When you have 100 armor, you have the damage that you take. Whereas if you've got 50 armor, you reduce the damage you take by 66%. So it changes only by 34% by going up an extra 50. That, in other words, that first 50 armor is worth twice as much as that second 50 armor. So one of the consequences of this, if you're firing at something that has 400 armor and you're reducing it by 50, you're barely reducing the damage you're barely increasing your damage at all. But if you fire at something that has exactly 50 armor, you're increasing your damage that you do against that target by 66%, which is a humongous increase in damage. So unintuitively, Disrupt Armor is strongest against targets that have exactly the amount of armor that you're going to strip. And it has the weakest effects on things that have ridiculous amounts of armor. So a lot of non-battleship capital ships have around 60 armor. And Disruptor armor at like cap stacks is very capable of dealing good damage against those. Now, as they level, they do gain the ability to have more armor, and they could itemize into more armor, and they could get upgrades that give them more armor, in which case Disrupt armor becomes proportionally weaker. However, like I said, it's sort of a linear thing. Even if you upgrade from 50 to 60, you're still increasing the damage that you deal by about 33.3%. That's still a huge upgrade. The reason that this kind of sucks is that if we look here, we've only got 1,620 armor points compared to 3,120 shield points, 3,640 hull points. So the way that this sort of works is that it takes those armor points that were lower and it makes it so that we go through those faster, and it does nothing during the rest of the time. So it's still quite good, but it's not anywhere near as good as it might be otherwise. This is a really, really weird debuff. The other thing about this is that, you're getting that 33% debuff to the amount of any enemy damage, or increase to the enemy damage that they're taking, and it applies to your whole fleet. So you go through their armor even faster, and then after that you start hitting their hull, and it stops mattering that you've got Disrupt armor. But if you didn't have this, the amount of effective armor points that this ship has at 90 armor strength is basically equivalent to having 3,000 armor points. If you hit this with Disrupt armor and you got that sort of full value there, instead of that being worth 3,000, it's only worth about 2,400, which is, a pretty substantial decrease in their effective armor points. So it's a weird ability. I think that it gets a bit underrated. It's virtually invisible, which also I think hurts it. It also stacks well with the Visari's missiles, because the missiles ignore shields and go straight to the armor. So being able to crack that faster means that you crack the shields and armor at roughly the same time, which means you go to the hull at about the same time, which can be really, really effective against certain advent ships. Because if you've cracked their armor before you crack their shields, that means that you go through their shields, they start activating their shield burst, and you're already bursting down their hull. Which means that you could kill them much more easily before they are able to regenerate their shields. So I think that this is better than it looks, but also not very good. It's in a really weird space. Super, super late game, just being able to increase your damage per second against like an Ankleon, even though it's not by very much. Any extra damage you can deal against that bastard is good. So I think that having someone that can use this at the late game is also kind of nice against those sort of Titans and stuff like that. Your ultimate is Volatile Nanites. You've got a cooldown of 4 minutes. It's got a range of 9,000. It's got an antimatter cost of 120. And anything that's in that radius of 2,500 takes 18% extra damage. So if you would have done 100 damage, it instead turns to 118 damage. This is a very good buff on its own. It lasts for 60 seconds, so it's got 25% uptime. Not that great. But what it also does is it gives damage on death. So any enemy that's in that radius that dies also explodes with a radius of 500, dealing 240 damage at 100 pierce. Against any sort of like cruisers or against any sort of like capital ships, that's not really going to mean anything. But against frigates, that's actually a pretty good chunk of damage. And what's worse is that also does get increased by the 18%. And what you can do is you can cast Volatile Nanites, Gravity Warhead, and Subspace Rupture all in the same sort of cluster of frigates, at which point they have a really hard time getting out of there. They take huge damage from the Subspace Rupture, and they take 18% more than that because of the Volatile Nanites. And as soon as you focus fire one of them down, it explodes and takes out all of its friends with it because all of those guys are really low on hit points as well from all the other bullshit that's going on. They explode. When they explode, they kill off everything that they're next to, and it just sort of like wipes out an entire blob of frigates. So the Vasari ability to clear out frigates with like just those two ships is really really strong. It's a lot harder to accomplish the same thing with the other factions. And I think that this is one of the most elegant ways to actually get rid of just a big ball of frigates, which can be a weakness for Vasari to a certain extent. The Revesta Skirmisher is not like great at dealing with a lot of the situations, and you're not really cost effective at fighting against enemy frigates to a certain extent until you get something like the Artovas Oppressors. So this can be a great way to deal with that. Getting to level 6 on this guy, a little bit tricky though. You're not going to necessarily have that when people are still focusing entirely on frigates, but if they do stick around with that for a lot longer than you would expect, then absolutely this combination is going to be really, really strong for you. So for tech, warfare research, we have, of course, the experience point upgrades. I don't think that there's anything that really breaks apart as soon as you get it to level 3, or get to level 3 with this guy. If you compare it to like the coal coming out of the gates with like level 1 beam, level 1 beam's actually not that good. Level 2 beam, however, is actually kind of scary, especially if you're capable of just pumping out a bunch of cheap coals that are on recycling duty, where you just lose it and you don't lose the exotics. So you just build another coal, and you just keep building them, and they just keep coming out with like level 2 beams. That can be really, really scary, being able to have access to level 2 beams instead of level 1 beams. Having access to level 2 power surge is kind of okay, but not like game changing. Having access to level 2 gem weapons is probably the best thing that you've got access to. I would not really say that level 2 disrupt armor makes much difference. So I think that out of the ones here, this one's paying the most for level 3 out of the gate, and is also kind of the worst at having that out of the battleships. There are other Vasari ships that I think would benefit more from 3rd generation crews than this one, but levels on every ship is actually really, really good, so it's not like I would sleep on this at all. You have absolutely no pulse weapons. Your one wave gun is pretty powerful, so it does actually matter that you get this. The beams are your actual like main weapon, because I think that this ship is going to mostly want to like be used for killing capital ships. Although you do have good damage against lighter ships, and being able to get rid of like frigates is an important tool. But I would sort of wombo combo to do that instead of using like the beams for that. Still pretty good to have access to that. The missile, this is the one that I would like get last if I had to choose between them. Like if I had to choose between getting like spending money on acute beams or advanced enemy warheads, I would definitely get the acute beams first, and I would definitely get exponential beams over superior NME warheads. Your missile damage is just not very high with the ship. Getting it, though, still something you're going to want to do at some point in time. I don't even know if heavy turret servos works for the ship, but you do get that extra range. It's a spinal mount. I don't think that this thing traverses very much regardless, so I don't think that getting that for is going to make it so that it can kill corvettes very effectively or anything like that. For survival, you're going to want everything in here, basically. That's kind of how capital ships work, just anything that makes them more durable. If I had to choose between them, again, I think that the regenerative effects are more effective for capital ships because you're going to be in the fight longer. For Vasari Alliance, you also have access to armor restoration, which is huge for this ship. I would definitely say that's one of those priority researches if you're playing as Vasari Alliance, and is one of the biggest reasons why I think Vasari Alliance is really good, is access to this ability on their capital ships. 15 armor strength and 15% max armor points, in addition to the fact that they still get armor, atomic lattice armor for an extra 36. They're getting 51 extra armor strength. That's really, really, really good. In addition to extra armor points as well, on top of the armor points from flawless armor. So they're getting 45% extra armor points. Like, that's really, really strong. For shields, it's a little bit more hit or miss. You get access to the reverse engineered shields as the Vasari Alliance. This disables your regenerative ability, but the shield burst is better, technically speaking, than the shield regeneration, even if you capped it out there. And the nice thing about the reverse engineered shields is that it also increases your max shield points and your shield regeneration. So in spite of everything, this is still good for your shield regeneration. It just means that once they go down, you're at a little bit of a weak point compared to other ships. Still, regenerative shielding, really, really strong. The Bifurcative shielding, really good because it also increases that regen. Same thing with multi-pass shield arrays. These are all really, really good for you. Phase attenuated shields, I again think is a little bit hit or miss. I don't like the active for there, but the regenerative effect is quite nice overall there. For civics, there's not really much that you benefit from in this tree. You absolutely do want the reactor bonuses because you do want to spam out those abilities, and this helps you keep on top of that. Later game, it becomes a lot less difficult to use Power Surge and Jam weapons in conjunction with one another. But if you sort of throw in the Volatile Nanites, you can throw off your cadence there to the point where you're not regenerating fast enough to use both of these constantly. So, like, you do hit a sort of wall if you are also casting Volatile Nanites and you're not doing anything to compensate for that. Just the basic techs here can let you last a lot longer before you run out there. Under certain circumstances, you may want to also be able to use the antimatter recharger, but I don't think it's super necessary for the ship under most circumstances, because by the time you get it, you're kind of in the later game. For other things here, we've got access to our phase stuff. I think that this is one of those ships that does really like access to the phase stuff. All the capital ships, I think, really benefit from this. So if you're going to build around... primarily if you build around utility, and we'll talk about this now, minus 36% antimatter cost, minus 36% ability cooldown means that you're actually equal to your previous ratios of antimatter cost to cooldown. So you don't actually like save any antimatter at maximum level because you're spamming out your abilities that much faster. And in that instance, what's happening is you're casting your abilities and having them much more frequently available, but you're not like regenerating antimatter net faster than you would be before. However, if you pull it back a little bit, you can actually end up in a situation where you're like net antimatter positive. So it does depend a little bit on what you're doing as to how far you really care to go down the utility tree. For this particular ship, you don't actually have to go to 36, I don't think, especially because you're going to want multiple Kortul's. So I think you can kind of get away with like going to 3, unless you really, really care about the volatile nanites, in which case you do want to go to 5. The utility tree just works really, really well for capitals because usually their abilities are more powerful than their weapons. And the Kortul is no exception to that. Your abilities are super strong for increasing your damage. And having 100% uptime for your ability actually gives you more benefit than having access to Combat 5. So being able to do this and have that sort of cost less and be able to cast it every time it comes off cooldown is actually stronger than having Combat 5 by just a little bit there. But obviously having both is going to be a little bit stronger there too. So if you do want to have both of these, I would definitely say that these two do benefit you a lot. Mobility is situational, but also very, very strong. For the Kortul, I think that the maximum speed is really, really powerful because having that ability to get into the middle of the enemy fleet so that you can use jam weapons is really, really powerful and really relevant to the fleet. In particular, though, like having the phase resonance mobility is super good for this because your entire fleet has that plus 18% maximum speed. I think one of the problems that you could have with Visari is that you've just jumped into the middle of the enemy fleet with a single Kortul Devastator, and the enemy sort of naturally sees this one Kortul that's sort of waddled into the middle of their formation, and they just immediately obliterate it. They're like, okay, that's gotten to the middle of my fleet. It's probably using jam weapons. Let's just kill that. So they kill it, and then you don't have jam weapons anymore. And you sort of trickle in another one, and it gets exploded. And then you trickle in your third one, and it gets exploded. If you move your entire fleet forward, your opponent might have a harder time figuring out which one of your Kortals is using jam weapons. And as a result, they can make it like much harder to figure out what they should prioritize targeting. And they may not even realize that you're using jam weapons because it's kind of hard to tell. So they may focus on something else like your Gerasol Evacuator, or they might focus down your Scarantra instead. So being able to sort of move your entire fleet faster with mobility 5 or mobility 3 or whatever, that also helps quite a bit. Depending on what you're prioritizing, each of these trees can be very, very important for the Kortul. And I think that all of them are quite good. Now, obviously, if you're going for a short duration burst, you're not really going for a super long phase resonance. Mobility is the one that is probably going to be least relevantly impacted by the fact that you don't have it up all the time. Combat is probably the one that works best if you're going for the really long one. Just because, like, even with utility, you could run out of antimatter, and hopefully, like, you've burst them down over the 4 minutes enough that, like, you can just clean them up with the combat bonus. But combat, like, having that bonus for 12 minutes straight is really, really powerful. So I think that phase resonance for this ship, like, it can go in any direction. All of them are fantastic. All of them do a lot for this particular vessel and fleets that contain it. Now, for builds, you're hampered a little bit for Visari because your items are bad. This is why I think that late game you fall behind in brawling compared to the Radiance or the Coal, and your abilities don't let you do the sort of cheese that you can get out of like a Radiance or a Coal either. Where the Radiance is capable of like suppressing down enemy capital ships, where if they've got like even Radiances to your capital ships, you can find your fleet really really struggling to actually cast spells because your antimatter is constantly getting detonated, and the coal is capable of just having it like have a level 2 beam. It runs in and it sort of explodes. The next coal picks up the beam, fires the beam, and so on and so forth. You can't do that kind of thing with this thing. It actually has to like survive to level up so that it can get a higher level jam weapons. It's primarily being used for that jam weapons, which requires the rest of your fleet to be pulling its weight for it to really sort of defeat the enemy fleet here, because you're not going to like win on Kortul's by themselves necessarily. So yeah, like the weapons make it so that it's not capable of brawling in the same way as the other guys out there. So the best weapon that you do have is the beam modulator. So if you are going for the power surge build, where you go like power surge, disrupt armor, power surge, beam modulator is going to be the only real weapon upgrade that's guaranteed necessary. This one makes it so you're better at dealing damage to capital ships, and the 24% damage increasing to 48% at max level, and then 96 when activated. That's a humongous amount of damage for 60 seconds. Combine that with the power surge, which is multiplicative to that. You're dealing a really, really good amount of damage for 60 seconds, and then a very good amount of damage off that 60 seconds. The wave modulator is technically giving you more damage per second output than the beam modulator most of the time. And it, again, increases to 48% on damage, 24% on reload, and then it stacks with the power surge. So you can get a lot of damage from the wave modulator. The problem is that the wave gun is lower pierce, and it would let you chew through chaff ships super, super, super quickly. If you got the wave modulator and you combine that with power surge. But that does mean you're kind of wasting those beams a little bit by firing them at cheaper ships. If you're up against things like Exorias, though, or Javelises or something like that, and you just need to clear them out quickly, then a beam modulator with the power surge build would actually be quite nice. Typically, you're going to want to get a bunch of nanocatalyzer swarms. That's going to help you out so you can keep casting spells as well. Phase missile augments you're going to ignore. I don't think that those are any good for this particular ship, but if you wanted to max it out, theoretically you could get those. I actually still don't even think that they're worth it in a maximum damage output build. Nano repair swarms, they might be necessary if you're a bit worried about this guy, but they need it a lot less than other Visari capital ships. If you've got the power surge build, you're getting that shield restore up to 36 per second. If you need that and you need the nano repair swarm, you're in a lot of trouble. So I would go with the nano catalyzers just so you can cast another power surge, which is going to get you access to that shielding, which I think is better. The nano attack swarm does actually make sense in the earlier game for this thing. It's going to probably try to duel an enemy capital ship. And being able to just chuck the nano attack swarm on top of like an enemy ship to attack it to deal that extra damage. It is extra damage. It's like not a terrible amount either. So just being able to kill the enemy capital ship faster, to scare it off, combine that with a power surge, combine that with whatever else it is you're capable of doing. That is going to make it so that it can swing a fight just a little bit harder in your favor. But once you sort of scale into the late games, I wouldn't necessarily rely on the consumables for this thing. Hopefully your antimatter is under control, but depending on what you're up against, you may need to get the antimatter recharger with this build. If you're up against something that's capable of siphoning some of your energy, like some radiances or doonobs, but not like an absolute spam of those, then the antimatter recharger can make sure that you're capable of casting some of your power surge. If you're up against those things and you don't have this, they can pretty easily like get you down to the point where you can't effectively cast power surge ever. The resonance amplifier is really great if you're going for a utility build or a weapon damage build. So I think that the Power Surge does benefit a lot from the Resonance Amplifier, depending on what you're getting. So this could actually be a really strong tool for the ship here. Gravity Stabilizer, I don't think that you need that very much with the Power Surge build. I think it's better on a Jam Weapons build, so I wouldn't say that you want the Gravity Stabilizer here. You never want Strikecraft Armor. You do want Self-Repairing Armor. Self-Repairing Armor is the best durability buff for the Visari ships. 60% armor generation during combat is really, really, really powerful. Once every 4 minutes, you can also get back 24% of your maximum armor points, which is, again, really powerful. I don't think that you want to skip this out on any of your capital ships. It's just something you want to get on all of them. But this ship in particular wants something like that. I don't think that you get inertial anchor on the ship. There are other ships that have more open slots available that I would say benefit from this, so I wouldn't put on this guy. And phase attenuated shield, I don't love this thing, but you've got an argument for it. Plus 60% to shield regeneration is a lot of extra effective hit points. So if you're going for the power surge sort of thing, early game you're going for nano catalyzers and nano attack swarms. You want the beam modulator, potentially the wave modulator under certain circumstances. Potentially the phase attenuated shield. You definitely want the self-repairing armor. The two that you definitely want are the beam modulator, phase self-repairing armor. Everything else is sort of conditional. If you want to be making sure that you can cast your spells through certain situations there, you get the antimatter. If you want to have a really strong phase resonance, you go for the resonance amplifier. If you want to survive no matter what, you get the phase attenuated shield. Yeah, that's pretty much how that would go. So that's assuming that you go for like the Power Surge and Disrupt Armor. If we go for Power Surge and Jam Weapons, at that point in time, you absolutely do want an antimatter recharger during the sort of later part of the game. You can scale to the point where like Jam Weapons and Power Surge and just can be cast off of cooldown if they're max level because they become more efficient over time. But as soon as you throw in volatile nanites, you're actually jumping past your ability to regenerate your antimatter fast enough, so you will actually run into bumps where you're not capable of casting anything. And if you're getting like tapped by a Radiance or something like that, or getting tapped by a Dunov, that immediately puts you into the point where even if they've only got like a couple of those, you can't cast anything very, very quickly because you're just running through it so fast with Jam Weapons and Power Surge combined. It's like 210 just to cast both of these, and then like another 120 from this. So you're looking at 330 just to cast everything. At that point in time, Antimatter Recharger does actually help you a decent amount if you're going to get suppressed after you've cast everything once. Other than that, like this build is pretty similar to the one that focuses primarily on Power Surge, because you're still looking at an offense-orientated ship. I would still say in this case, though, that you're a little bit more defense-orientated. So I would probably get something like the Beam Modulator, the Phase Attenuated Shield, the Self-Repairing Armor, and the Antimatter Recharger. And if I was going for both of these, the way I would level it is I would go Power Surge, Jam Weapons, Power Surge, Jam Weapons, Volatile Nanites. The reason I would level up Power Surge twice early is because Power Surge scales a little bit nicer and more elegantly than Jam Weapons, and being able to use Power Surge is a little bit better for clearing systems and for killing off early game fleets. By contrast, Jam Weapons works better when the enemy has a very large fleet, which they won't during the earlier points of the game. But by the time you're hit level 6, you do have to worry about having the ability to use like the level 3 Jam Weapons. So I would leave this at level 2, get this to level 3. So that's the pattern I would use for that particular build. The last build that we're going to talk about is Jam Weapons and Disrupt Armor. There's no build where I would ever consider getting Disrupt Armor like first and leveling it to highest. But going Jam Weapons, Disrupt Armor, Jam Weapons, Disrupt Armor, Jam Weapons. This makes your capital a support type vessel. And this is where you know that your rest of your fleet is going to be very, very capable of destroying the enemy. In this particular case, again, you do need that Nano Catalyzer Swarm. You may want to get a Nano Repair Swarm because you no longer have that ability to heal yourself with Power Surge. But on the other hand, you have Jam Weapons like maxed out and you're casting it much more aggressively. So you may not need to get the Nano Repair Swarm because you're capable of keeping yourself alive more elegantly through reducing enemy damage. Still, this could be necessary under certain circumstances. I wouldn't get a Nano Attack Swarm in that particular case, although technically speaking, it's still just as good in this instance. I wouldn't bother necessarily with offense in this particular case. That's not my priority in this instance, but I would still consider getting the B modulator, maybe as a last resort item. You still do deal relatively okay anti-capital weapon damage with this thing. It's just you're not getting that sort of scaling bonus with the power surge, so I don't think you're getting as much out of it. So in this case, what I would probably get in the later game, once we get full items, we're looking at phase attenuated shield, self-repairing armor, the gravity stabilizer, and the antimatter recharger. Maybe not that. I might get the resonance amplifier instead. The reason is that, like, if I want to do this, I want to get into the enemy fleet, and being more durable helps a lot more with that. And then I want to be able to do good positioning really quickly, so gravity stabilizer matters. And then for casting, resonance amplifier can matter quite a bit there. I do think that you can run out early with jam weapons. I think that by the time you realistically get antimatter recharger, though, you probably have scaled out of the point where you're going to run out of antimatter just casting jam weapons off cooldown, even though it's really, really expensive. So during the early game, when you do have problems with that, you get nanocatalyzer swarms later on. You can switch over to the antimatter recharger if you really have to, but you're probably fine. Once you get to the point where it's a 90-second cooldown, you're only casting this once every 90 seconds. The antimatter cost is synced up to that. You should be able to keep up with the antimatter cost of this, even if you're also casting volatile nanites. So that's how that sort of build would work. Yeah, so if you're playing as Visari Exodus, you also have the option for infrastructure. I do not think that the Kortul's an appropriate ship to put infrastructure on. Not only are they likely to run forward and use jam weapons, but even if they're not doing that, they're probably getting in fistfights using power surge. In either of those cases, they're kind of vulnerable and might become a high priority target. You wouldn't want to lose tech because your battleship that was in the front lines brawling it out with the enemy got killed. I think that you're better off putting infrastructure on something that's likely to be in the background and just supporting your fleet from the outside there. Something like a Scarantra that's keeping itself just in range of your other capital ships so it can armor patch them from maximum distance, but is otherwise on hold and is not even like in the fight, is probably your best bet to put infrastructure on. But this is definitely not what you want. That it's also a ship that really, really wants to have its like offense and defense and utility stuff stuffed onto it. So infrastructure really is not something I think is appropriate for a Kortul Devastator. So anyway, those are the builds as far as I understand it. If someone does have a way to make it so that you take like 3 stacks of disrupt armor and then like something else, or evenly through all 3 of these or something like that, then I'm sure that there's some person who does that. I just can't figure out a good reason why you would do that. And the reason I think that you don't do all 3 is that like both power surge and jam weapons become more antimatter efficient as you level them. So it actually becomes easier to cast when you fully level, whereas like in most situations in most games, like they would actually have an increase in antimatter cost or magic cost. Like if you're playing a MOBA, higher level skills usually cost more mana. Not in this game. Not in this game. So yeah, in that particular case, like if you were leveling all 3 sort of evenly, you would just make yourself run out of antimatter even faster, and all of your abilities would suck. So yeah, it wouldn't be great. In any event, though, that's going to be our video for today. I hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you guys all next time.